Hi, class. So, for this lecture, I just want to take a few minutes and go over a little bit about APA. So, APA can be tricky and it takes time and practice, but it does follow a formula. And when you learn what that formula is, it makes it a little bit easier to get those elements into your academic work. And basically, APA, it's a way, the reason we include those citations and references in our work is it's a way to make our work more academic and credible. And then it's more because it's about sharing the information. You didn't come, we want to see more of your own critical analysis, but you had to get those ideas from somebody. So you always want to make sure that you're crediting those sources. Think of it as like, you come up with some new cake recipe, and then, people start taking that recipe, and then they claim it as their own, and they don't give you any credit for coming up with it. Or, you come up with a new car design or whatever, a new way to make airplanes fly faster than jet stream type engine or something, and the point is that you made it, but nobody gives you credit for it. So that's kind of what APA is. It's acknowledging these people's ideas and giving them credit for sparking our ideas. So in saying that, APA really it shouldn't it be something that we stress out a lot about when we go to write. It should be kind of an afterthought. Like I said, the majority of our writings in academia, it's about our voice. It's showing our voice, our critical assessment of these ideas, these events, these cultures, whatever it may be. We want to show our critical assessment of that information, and at the same time, we want to make sure that we give credit where credit is due. So APA follows a very simple formula, and no matter what type of source you have, it's always going to follow that formula. The tricky part is that we think that because we have a web page, or we have a journal article with the DOI or without the DOI, or we have a textbook, that somehow that formula changes, and it doesn't. Really the only thing that kind of makes the formula change is when you start getting into this last part. So the basic formula: who wrote it, when did they write it, what is it, what's the name of it, and then where did you get it. So we see the most basic APA formula there. It's for a book, because technically books came before any other form of media. So that's our most basic. So we have the author's last name, the initial of the first name, the date, the title of the book, and then the publisher. That's changed with the seventh edition. We used to do the state and the city and state, and then the publisher, but now we just put the publisher at the end. All right. And so if that was a textbook you got online, you then would have the URL link behind that. Okay. And then we see the next one there would be a journal article. So, once again, we have that same formula: who wrote it, when did they write it, what is it, and where did you get it. Because it's in a journal article now, you have more information that you put in that where did you get it part of the formula. And like I said, I think that's where we tend to get a little messed up a lot of the time, because we think, oh, that's something totally different. Like, no, still that formula. It's just taking the elements of the where did you get it from and putting it into that formula. So, in looking at this formula too, note the punctuation, note the italicizing, because there are particular times that you're going to want to make sure that you have those elements in your citations and references too. Not your citations, but in your references too. It's always going to be on the reference page that you have this full formula listed, because the in-text citations, that's just like the quick little note. Be like, oh yeah, this idea came from right here at this source. Boom. Because once again, it's about your critical analysis. So we're trying not to take away from that. So, simple in-text citation, and I'll get to that in just a minute. And then on the reference page, that's where you put that full formula, because you're putting that full source information, right? And like I said, all sources follow this formula. It's just about, kind of being a detective and looking at what source you have and finding all of these elements. And then once you have all of the elements, then it's easy to just, set it up in the formula there, right? So next, I just have some different examples of works here. And once again, guys, you see there's no deviation. Who wrote it? When did they write it? What is it? Where did you get it? And then if you notice underneath that, I have the quick little in-text citations of how you would note that. And there's a few basic ways that you can note authors in text. So, the way that you incorporate them into your writing. And then best, easiest way to do it is just to have that date, that name, excuse me, name and date at the end of a paragraph or at the end of a sentence. Because then, when you do it that way, you're showing your critical analysis, but you're also then, giving that quick note of, hey, this is where the ideas came from. So in looking over this, you see, once again, this is a good slide. If you guys want to save it, I think you can take a screenshot when you're watching videos, I believe. Pause it and take a screenshot. These are, the formulas and the way that you would set up all these different sources. And I think as far for the purpose of our class goes, these are going to probably be most of the referencing you're going to do will be from one of these different type sources. So you see I have a YouTube video there too, so that you have an idea of how to cite those. And then you see we have the journal article with the DOI number, and then we have a journal article without a DOI number. Students often ask, what does that DOI number mean? And it has to do with cataloging um, and those sources of information. It's kind of like some of you guys were probably familiar or remember the Dewey Decimal System back at library when you actually had to go to a library and look through articles and look through newspapers and look through all sorts of different books, and they had to have everything organized in a specific way. That's pretty much just what that DOI number is. It's just a way of organizing those journals and those articles. So and if you have an article and you don't see that DOI number on it, it's okay. It more than likely doesn't have one because they don't all have one, especially newer ones, possibly. I'm trying to think. Probably some, well, sometimes they'll have them, sometimes they won't, guys. My point is that, if it does, just make sure you include that in the way that I have it set up there. And then if it doesn't and you get it online, then you simply just want to put that URL link of where you got it from there. So sometimes when you go to look up information and you're using websites, you will get to some websites and you'll notice that there aren't really any authors, there's not a name for an organization. And maybe even I think all of us, we've had the internet around enough that we can kind of start to discern those kind of more non-credible websites as opposed to the more credible websites. So a website that's probably not going to be sufficient for academic use, that um, not sufficient for academic use, no authors, or no parts of this formula. Maybe it'll just have a name and it'll have a date. But if you're not finding all the parts of the formula that you need to set up your citations and your references, then that's probably a good idea. That's that red flag that this isn't probably a very credible website. In best case scenario is to go find a credible website. The library is always a great place to find resources, so I do always encourage students to go there first when you are looking for sources for your work. And if you ever need any help finding something in the library, just reach out to me. I'm happy to help that way. So sometimes you'll come to websites and you won't see that author listed, and they will be credible websites. So a good way to gauge that is just kind of look at what the website is and the purpose and intention there. So a lot of websites that aren't going to have specific authors listed with articles will be ones like governmental sites, governmental organizations, universities, and then like specific social groups and social organizations. So, like the National Osteoporosis, Osteoporosis, excuse me, Foundation, the NAACP, the National Forestry Service. The U.S. Census Bureau website, like, those are websites it's just going to be the name of that organization is the only name that you can find in association with it. And that's okay because it's a credible source. It's an established type of organization. Like I said, it's a university, something related to government. It's a group that's in the social sphere that has a lot of history and credential behind it. Then you will use that name as your author. And so, as I'm talking, I'm sure you guys have had time to look over this slide. And so you see these examples I have. And then in there too, I also have an example of how to set up a quotation there, and we'll go over that in just a second. I just want to point that out. So you see, for who wrote it, I put the National Osteoporosis Foundation, and then so on and so forth. When, what is it, where did you get it from? Now, if you have a website with an author, then you simply just plug those elements into the formula there. And a lot of time you see it says California Job Journal, though it will be so like say if it was on the National Osteoporosis Foundation website, we would just have that listed there. My point is that if there is like this functioning body organization that's behind that website, you'll put their name as part of the where did you get it from. So you got it from them on that website right there. Hopefully that makes sense, you guys. It's all right. So there's a few different ways to include citations within your posts and your papers. And I say using an online textbook. That's the example I have. But once again, guys, this applies to any source that you would use. And best, easiest way to always get that in there. I have a mistake here. I have a couple mistakes on this page. Like for one right there on number C, that period should not be right there in front of my citation. Periods always go after the citation. The reason I went to that one is because that really is the easiest way to get that APA in and, still have your voice there. So I took the direct quote you see there, number D, the sand of the Kalahari Desert are the oldest culture in the world. That's directly quoted from their book. That's what Novak and Laird has written in their book, right? So I paraphrase that. So in my own words, you see the number C. That's what I came up with. And to note that I got that from them, I simply just put the last name and date at the end of that sentence. Good rule of thumb is at least one citation per paragraph, okay? And then, like I said, periods always come after your citations at the end there, not before. It's because your citation is part of the paragraph. So you want to, end your paragraph with a period at the end, right? All right. And then you see if you want to get a little fancy and you want to include those authors, you want to combine, I guess is a better way to say it, combine what they're saying with what you're writing. Then you see, once again, we're just using the name and the date. That's the easiest way to do it in text because, I would dissuade everybody from using quotes a lot. Once again, academic writing is about your critical analysis, showing your voice, making your brain smarter. So we generally discourage students from using a lot of quotes because that's when you start dipping into those realms of lack of similarity and then plagiarism at the worst end. And no matter which one of these ways that you choose to formulate your citations within your work, the reference is always going to be the same. And no matter how many times you reference that work within your own writing, you only list it once on the reference page. Okay. And then real quickly, it's always a good idea to know the difference between primary and secondary sources. A lot of classes and subjects you're going to take, they will ask you to specifically, have primary sources and then, have secondary sources. So a good way to look at that is that primary sources are the original sources. They're going to be works that are written during a specific time period. So if you're doing research on Nazi Germany, Hitler's one of his recorded speeches, his work, Mein Kampf, um, any of those original Nazi policies, those are all going to be primary works. The Diary of Anne Frank, that's a primary work because she's talking about her experiences and her lifetime. So, secondary sources are the ones that come along afterwards, and they're the ones that are examining those primary sources. So, Diary of Anne Frank, primary source because it's her experience during the time that she lived. A secondary source would be a journal article that I would write that is looking at Jewish families' experience during the Holocaust. Maybe then I would reference the Diary of Anne Frank as one of the sources where I got my information from. So you see, the secondary source is always going to come after, and there's always going to be some type of retrospection, introspection beyond, because we're now afterwards, so we're speculating on what's going on with those original sources or those original time periods. So here are some different examples of primary sources. I hope I didn't go through that too quickly. So even, when it comes to cultural texts, we have artifacts, relics, those would be primary sources, constitutions, creative works, and then textbooks. Textbooks would be secondary sources because they're coming after the fact. Secondary sources would be documentaries. Secondary sources would be a critical analysis. It would be like a book review. It can be radio interviews. It could be podcasts. And those would all be secondary sources, unless, of course, the caveat there would be if you're doing a podcast or a radio interview or a television series that is on like something that's going on in the present time. So, like, say, if you were to go to the Kalahari Desert and you were to interview people of the sand culture who are the Bushmen, and you would interview them, and then you'd write a paper up about that, or you make a movie about that. That would technically be a primary source because you're doing it on them about their experiences in the present moment. That's a good way to look at it too, but most of the times it's primary, it's past tense. So we're looking at those past tense moments. So hopefully that helps with APA and with secondary and primary sources, guys. And if you need any help with anything, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to me. Thanks. Bye.